What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Welcome to a Thursday NBA show, gang. A little short notice pop-up show. Hopefully you guys got the notification. Hopefully there's some people out there. Haven't gotten my little count yet for who's in chat, but we'll see who comes along. Interesting day of basketball to deal with today. Interesting night of basketball last night. Been just giving little tidbits of results in Discord the last couple of days. Put one in 30-something overall on FanDuel yesterday. It was my only top 1%er. But like we talked about, always looking for those top 1% lineups. Just keep on putting those in a couple times a week, and you will get there, and you will make money doing this. So nice profitable night. Nothing crazy. But made a solid little profit. Just under $100 on the night, and put one in 36th place. So again, right on the cusp of the top edge of the slate with not nearly 150 lineups in. I do not play full sets these days all that often. So it is very, very doable getting into that top 1% with consistency, with process, taking these Roto Scouts projections, dropping them into our guys over at Ace Mine for Sims. It is possible to get there, gang. That's why they call it a grind. You just got to keep on grinding out those 1%ers so you get one over the top. But anyway, got a couple people in here, and vamping is done. I'm going to lose until I win. The Millie's here, Tiz is here, Cujo's here. Good to see you guys. Handful of people here so far. Very different slates across the sites today. We've got 7 games on DraftKings. They dropped the 10 o'clock game, which kind of makes sense with everything else at the beginning of the night. FanDuel's got a 2-hour break and then that 10 o'clock game. And as you can see on the board right now, just look at some of these numbers as far as how guys are coming up from that late game. So that is a massive, massive piece of the FanDuel slate. We haven't really had one that's broken quite this way, where there's this much weight going into that game. It's Houston Golden State. Just taking a look at the full game. That's 362% of our ownership going to that game on FanDuel. And it's just not on the board on DK. So radically, radically different slates across sites today. Should be fun to talk through. I don't think that's a great idea. I'm going to lose until I win the Millie. Can we stay away from chalk today from San Antonio? Wouldn't, especially considering that both Charles Bassey and Zach Collins are at the top of the board, 76% and 61% exposed, 3,000, 3,500. If you haven't been paying attention all day, no Wemby for San Antonio is creating that situation. Right now, I've got it 25.5, 22.5 split between those two guys, and then I threw a scrap minute to Mamushvili, which is an X factor in that equation. But both Bassey and Collins look tremendous today on DraftKings. They're just dirt cheap for the opportunity. I don't know that we've had a value score so far this season that's as high as that 9.31 value score that Charles Bassey's showing in, again, 22.5 minutes. He could go out there and play 25-26. So he just goes up from here. I do not think they're just good building blocks, right? You just consider it put one of those two guys in your lineup or both of those guys, and then consider it like your decisions are the other 7 or 8 spots. That's just how lineups are going to work on DK today. So no, you're not going to want to avoid that. Those guys are 5,500 and 5,800 respectively on FanDuel. They're 2% and 0% exposed on the FanDuel slate. You can grab a little bit more, but they are not at all necessary to the FanDuel slate, at least as it's coming up right now. But yeah, Millie, no worries, bud. But those are the guys, when they come up that strong, when they come up like crazy, crazy high values like this. And we do have a couple other, very strong pieces of value on this board. It's not a bad slate that way for DraftKings. But these guys are just fundamental to being able to put these guys in your lineup, right? 26% of SGA, 26% of Jokic, going along with 32% of Booker. At 6,700, we're getting a nice big chunk of Malik Monk here. 9,000, we're getting a lot of De'Aaron Fox. So to be able to put combinations together of all these high-priced guys and then like a couple good mid-range pieces, you just need these two guys to open that value door for you. And that's what they do. They go out there and look, we've got them projected for strong performances, no doubt. But they're capable players. Zach Collins, 1.07 per minute last year, 1.02 this year, 101 on DraftKings. Charles Bassey, in the minutes that he gets, He's a per-minute monster. Yeah, so far this season, it's only 8.5 minutes over 12 games per night. But last year, 1.20 in the action that he got. We've seen him do this before, so just got to go, you just got to plow straight into those. And again, you look at it as a building block, like I say a lot, but it's also just like they need to open that door, and then your other 7 guys can walk through that door. And getting those guys together is going to be crucial for building correctly constructed lineups today. And then you've got a nice mix of guys that you can take in and out of those other spots. We've got a number of really good-looking superstars at a variety of prices today that all bounce in and out of that on DK. So it's just a really interesting, it's a good way to start the show, and it's a great question. And, that also leads me to another thought that I just wanted to bring up again real quick as we get into things. 20 people here. Good to see you guys. Everybody who I didn't say hi to already, hello. So just real quick, talking about low-owned guys and making pivots from plays that come up like this that are, let's say you're not a big OG fan or whatever, right? 6,100. You don't necessarily just want to be like, all right, 6,000 Jeremy Sohan is comparable. Now, Sohan's not a great example of that because he could definitely succeed in this spot. Who is a better example? Well, let me forget about finding an example. I don't want to waste too much time on it. My point was going to be, I see still too much about just the idea of just pivoting to somebody just because he's low-owned. And you really don't want to do that. It's not about individual ownership. It's about the combinatorics of the slate. It's about how these things come together across position, across value, and price, which is value. And you very much, we're at the point these days where the public ownership is very sharp, right? It follows the correct optimal path because all the sites are doing that and everybody's providing sims and everybody's doing things a certain way, so that you want to be in that flow. And then when you make decisions to differentiate lineups, you want to be going to other guys who are coming up as pretty significant pieces. That's what a lot of these guys in this kind of a range are for. You pick your spots between these guys and you dance in this area. And that's just, it gets you to, I promise you, just the sheer force of math gets you to unique combinations just using these guys. You do not need to go to these guys who are owned at 0%. Now, a few shares of Jamal Murray, perfectly fine, no problem with it. He didn't come up for us. He's not a value on this slate. Hartenstein, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't need to just purely say like, Christian Brown is probably going to be 4% owned at 5,500 versus somebody up here. The guy up here is a better play for a reason, right? So it's not just about the math. You want to be pivoting to similar plays, highly optimal plays. You don't want to just grab a guy because he's 2%. He's 2% owned for a reason, or 0% owned for a reason. So a little bit too much of that still going on. Just wanted to bring it up and throw it out there for everybody before we dive in. But again, very different slates. Hello, Price Productions. Good to see you. Buzelis is kind of interesting. Where did he come up? Yeah, he's right here. So yeah, being 3,000 on that DK slate definitely makes him interesting. I've got him just at 21 minutes and he's coming up like crazy, 41% over there. So yeah. Another interesting value piece for sure. Putting him in with these other two gives you extreme purchasing power. I don't know that it necessarily is the optimal approach. That's one that you would rely on sim results to kind of guide you. But there's a path there for sure as far as that value. He's another guy that will help kick down that value door in a big, big way. Let's talk Vegas and insy outsies real quick, and then we'll dive into some of these values. Let's see here. Oh, it's just in a different order again. I always get nervous when these games are in a different order. Denver, Cleveland. Cleveland favored by 4.5 at home, 234-point total there. I'm sure we'll see our usual pieces and parts of the Cleveland side of things. There's a few decently priced mid-range guys in the Mitchells, the Mobleys of the world on that side. We're already seeing a decent chunk of Jokic because of all the value on the board. So, reasonable spot to consider there. 234 points is a very solid total, but there are a number of highly total games in this one. We got that one at 234. We've got the Mavs as 14-point favorites on the road in Washington against just a terrible Wizards team. 232-point total in that one. Charlotte and the Knicks. Knicks favored by 14.5. So that's two 14-point spreads in those two games. That's just a 218-point total. Knicks starters, as usual. The Charlotte value, I think, is kind of leveled off at this point. We'll see how guys come up when we dig into that one. But I'm not sure how much we get from that. OKC, Toronto. OKC favored by 9.5 on the road in Toronto. 226.5 point total. Obviously, Shea is hitting the board very, very hard. Love seeing that. Anytime we're getting those big chunks of superstars means, one, we've got major values on the board, which we know we do, and two, that it's going to be an extreme Starsy Scrubsy kind of a slate. And SGA, big part of that. Maybe a couple of the top-end guys from Toronto. Not sure how they're going to really land when we look through the Sims. 242-point total on the board between Sacto and Memphis. Really interesting game there. Just a 3.5-point spread. Memphis favored at home. Don't love the Memphis side just with how they run minutes on that team, but Sacramento is really interesting. I've called them the Knicks West a couple times just for how much that starting unit, those top five guys play, and it's significant. I think it's well worth going to, the biggest total of the night. So hopefully we're going to see those guys come up. And we'll go through those. Chicago presenting some value, and then San Antonio, the major value of the day on the other side. Should be a interesting, competitive, pacey kind of a game. Two-point spread. San Antonio favored by 2 at home, despite no Wemby. 236-point total. Phoenix and New Orleans. Phoenix favored by 2 on the road, despite no KD, no Nurk in that one. New Orleans likely getting some pieces back today. I think Ingram and Herb Jones are both back. 220. I say I think because I think they went to from questionable to available earlier. But 222.5 point total in that one. I like the idea of getting to some Booker. I'm always a fan of Book when there's no Durant out there, and especially with no Nurk also. Just going to be a boatload of opportunity for him to go capitalize on. And then maybe some downstream options as well. And then the end of the night, the one that's huge on FanDuel. Just a 219 point total. It's Houston, it's Golden State. No Steph for Golden State. No Draymond for Golden State. Really giving a lot of opportunities to the top of the board there. And then Houston, Freddie Van Vliet's questionable, so we might get some value out of that. No Tari Eason, so we're going to just see, again, major shares of that Houston Golden State game on the FanDuel slate. As far as the ins and the outs, get through it quickly. Oh, jeez, I still have last night's window open. That's how long I sit there with these things. All right, so today, probables. Malcolm Brogdon's available. Aaron Gordon probable. Eve Misi available. Brandon Ingram and Herb Jones are both available. Questionables. Ty Jerome. Precious Achua. Nice piece for the Knicks to get back if he comes back finally. Campaign's also questionable. Minor impact if those two guys don't play. It's just a shuffling of minutes. Jericho Sims gets back his minutes that he doesn't currently have in the projections. And then some downstream impact from the 16 or so minutes the campaign would have. But nothing critical there. The Knicks, it's all about that top unit. Grady Dick's questionable. Jakob Poeltl's questionable. Josh Giddey is questionable. Ryan Dunn is questionable. Freddie Van Vliet and Andrew Wiggins are both questionable. Out. Dante Exum, Najee Marshall, Patrick Baldwin, Sadiq Bey, Keyshawn George, Corey Kispert, Kyle Kuzma, Vlaco Konkar, Max Strus, LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges, Trey Mann, Grant Williams, Mitchell Robinson, Ousmane Dieng, Chet Holmgren, Jalen with a Y, Williams, Bruce Brown, Emmanuel Quickly, Lonzo Ball, Kobe White, Patrick Williams. There's some of your Bulls value being created. Trey Jones, Victor Wembanyama. There's some of your Spurs value. Kevin Durant, Yusuf Nurkic, there's your Suns. Jose Alvarado still out. Jordan Hawkins still out. Daniel Theis is out. Zion Williamson is still out. Devin Carter, Trey Lyles, Zach Edey, Gigi Jackson, Vince Williams Jr., Tari Eason, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Anthony Melton are all out today. A number of those guys are just out long term. So let's get into this one. Bunch of people here hanging out. Hit the like button as we get started. Hit the subscribe button. I mean, assuming you like it. I don't want to force you to do anything. Not that I can force you. But if you don't mind, hit the like button. Hit the subscribe if you like the show. It'll let you know when we go live. If you want the projections, under $1 a day for NBA, NHL, and NFL right now. So you got an NFL showdown slate. You've got a 9-game NHL slate. And you've got this NBA slate for $1 for today, or less than $1. 6 and change gets you from here to next Thursday, including the Sunday NFL main slate, etc., etc. Check it out at rotoscouts.com. Sims runs over at AceMind. That's acemind.io. Promo code rotoscouts gets you 20% off your first month over there. Let's sort by, we got to sort by FanDuel Sims, but sorted by DraftKings. top 150 as usual, but we're going to filter by FanDuel positioning just because of the different slates. It's usually how we attack it, and we'll make sure that we haven't missed anybody across sites. So among guards, the major outliers for that late game on FanDuel, and there are some of them. Amen Thompson for 6,100 shooting guard and small forward eligible, putting up a 5.4 value score, coming up 53% of the time in our sim in our top 150 lineups. That's ahead of the field, but the field is there significantly because he looks like a very strong piece. 114 per minute last year, 102 per minute this year, so we know there's a little bit of additional upside. He's played 26-6 a night. I've got him getting a little bit of an uptick with some missing parts in Houston. Definitely interesting. Jalen Green also picks up value. These guys just go through the roof if Freddie VanVleet doesn't play. He's there, but he's 11% under the field. If Freddie VanVleet plays, you can definitely take him. 7,300 is not a bad price. He's just a .99, 1.0 essentially per minute guy. That's down slightly on essentially the same usage, but it's a matter of a couple good games basically gets him back to where he was. So there's enough faith in VanVleet. It's just the Q tag right now that's kind of holding him up. Not that his projection's really going to change, but what I'm saying is if you level it off at 15, if you have a little bit more, you're fine. I am interested in Jalen Green, and again, if these two guys go way up if VanVleet doesn't play. But Jalen Green right now at 33 minutes, looking like a piece, 30% level with the field, 0.94 per minute on 25% usage last year, a little better this year, a little better last year on 27%. But definitely a guy, if that shot's falling, if he's getting to the rim, if he's scoring, that is a player who can definitely go up in value very, very quickly. Scoring dependent kind of a guy. 53.5% true shooting, just a 12.8% assist, 6.6% rebounding rate. But if we get the right night where he's scoring, that can take off in a hurry. Podziemski, Dylan Brooks. Podziemski is fine. 9%. If you have 10, 12, you're fine there. Decent mid-range piece. 0.87 per minute. No Steph, no Draymond. Everybody's just going to have to carry the weight a little bit more for Golden State today. So there's upside there, but I don't want to go crazy with Podziemski. Same deal with Dylan Brooks. Definitely, I'm totally content having 5% Dylan Brooks being level with the field. 0.66 per minute this year. He's just never been a good per minute guy. 0.68 last year. He's fine. He does fit in for value. He's a mix and match guy who is going to play an appreciable number of minutes. But just nobody's idea of a very successful piece on a deep board with a ton of value on it. So it wouldn't be crazy if you wanted to say, I'll grab 10 against the 5 that the field has and just take a minor position. But it's really not my favorite guy to do that with given that low per minute mark. But he healed 18%, an interesting piece. Lindy Waters, I'm really surprised didn't come up. I thought I had him with enough of an edge for that 3,800 that we would see him. I'm going to probably... I mean, we'll want to see starters and everything there. But that's a dude they're not afraid to run out there for some minutes. And he's really cheap. I could give him... I don't want to really do it by rate. I would have to give him more minutes, and I don't know that giving him like 28 to 30 is appropriate. All right, I'm going to consider that one. You might see a little bit more Lindy Waters, but right now, not really coming up. I'm, again, surprised by that. We have him nearly at a 5 value score. It just kind of speaks to all the other values, I guess, on that FanDuel slate right now and how much we're getting some of those guys. But that's a little surprising. Mo Moody coming up 4.6% for the same 3,800. Reasonable option there. That could easily have been Lindy Waters. Maybe that's just where those shares are going. If you reran this could definitely come up the other way around. Because those guys are the same price. He's a little bit more highly projected. But mix and match guys there anyway. Getting to the full slate. Devin Vassell, top-owned guy among guards on the DraftKings slate. Makes total sense to me. 5,000 on DK. He's 6,000 on FanDuel. That's why we only got him 18% of the time and below the field. But still, that's a nice chunk of Devin Vassell to have. And it's a great game for them, great game environment for him to succeed in. No Wemby, somebody's got to score, somebody's got to do the work. He's already a 1.10 per minute player with 26% usage under normal circumstances. Big upside for Devin Vassell to succeed today, and this is just an exceedingly cheap price. That puts him above a 6. Again, we're looking for 5.5 on DraftKings as far as our value numbers go. We got a 6, a 5.76, a 5.88, a 5.61, a 6.04 down here that barely came up. Who is that? It's Jared Butler. 3,000. Jared Butler in 17 minutes of 3,000. We didn't even need his 6.04. That's how much value is on the DraftKings slate. It's a mixer at best, but it's there. But just demonstrate how much value is available today. It's absurd. Yeah, good NFL showdown tonight, says Millie. I like that game. I'm only going to throw a few lineups at it, but I definitely intend to watch that game. Should be a good one. Packers and the Lions, for those not familiar. The projections are up on the site. Check them out. Yeah, we'll be watching starters for all these teams. If they do something funky, power, obviously, there'll be big adjustments. But with the presumptive minutes, I've only got Vassell at 28 right now. I could easily see him cresting 30. So just would look better and better. Monk, 43%, well ahead of the field on the DraftKings slate, 6,700 point guard and shooting guard. He's nearly 1,000 more on the FanDuel slate. Really didn't come up that much. 8%, gentle undercut to the field. Field's probably in the 10-15 range there. Booker, we got him. 28% on FanDuel, 32%. I'm more enthusiastic about that. Like I said, I like getting Devin Booker when Kevin Durant is not on the court. It's a super easy path to success for him in that situation, and against this opponent, shouldn't have much in his way. 51.3 FanDuel points in 38-8 the other day. Easy path right back to that kind of a score or better for Devin Booker. 1.13 per minute this season, 1.16 on DraftKings, but was a 1-2-3 player just as recently as last year and plays around that level typically when some of the other guys aren't there. And again, no Nurk either. So that's two big sources of scoring and opportunities that are just going to create a void for a number of these Phoenix guys. Here's SGA right here. He's 10-8 on FanDuel. We're ahead of the field, 27%. I love it. I would take more if I can get there. And you have a nice big piece on DraftKings where, to somebody's point in the chat, Josh Gillum, SGA kind of cheap. Yeah, 10-1. What are we going to knock SGA below 10,000 for 1.50 per minute? That's just silly. That is very, very cheap. No issues taking more of SGA on the DraftKings slate with all the value available. And if you wanted to make the decision to build a position on him, I think, one, it's one of the best spots to do that on. And you can do it easily enough because if the field's only in the 25% range, kick that up to 35-40. You're buying one of the best possible players on the slate with one of the best possible per minute numbers in a great situation who's mathing out very, very well. And you're just kind of sacrificing shares of the other superstars. You're making a reasonable pivot, and you're probably saving money from some of them. So I really like that SGA spot on DraftKings, more so than what it looks like in the sim. Stephon Castle, massive piece on the FanDuel slate at 62%, 5,300 both guard spots on FanDuel, just 4,900 on DraftKings. That's a great price. 0.82 per minute. He's been very effective when he's played. 24% exposed on the DK slate for just 4,900. Again, we just almost don't need some of these values that much, right? THT at 3,100, not projected for a ton of minutes right now, but could certainly pick up a few. 13% because we just don't need that $3,100 small forward. We've got superstars that are going into that small forward spot because of all the center value, some of this guard value up top. So a lot of value plays just kind of fall by the wayside because they're not quite as good as some of the other value plays. We do get them, but not quite as strong. So that just has an interesting impact on guys like Castle. It's the same deal. For 49, we do get him. 1 in 4 lineups. But a different version of this slate without that crazy center value coming from his team, he could be a more interesting, more important piece. And definitely has a little bit of price-based upside if you're making pivots in a lineup and you need to bring a share of, let's say, $5,000 Devin Vassell down. Go to his teammate for 100 less if that makes a difference for you. That's a perfectly reasonable pivot. And you're getting him at half the ownership that the other guy is. So again, not worried specifically about individual ownership, but slotting that reasonable pivot in at half that ownership has an impact on your combinations in a good way. So that's a really interesting piece. Darren Fox, 32% on FanDuel. Love that. 8,900. Again, really interested in that Sacramento team. 9,000 on DraftKings. We got him 22% of the time. Love the upside there. 117 per minute on 30% usage this year. On DraftKings, that's a 1.21. 59.2% true shooting, a solid 25.7% assist rate. Spike's big upside games on the right day. Has more in the tank than what we've seen from him overall this year. 126 per minute last year, nearly a tenth of a point more per minute. We got at that level just last game, 37 minutes, 48.7 FanDuel points. For the price, that's good. It's a solid return. It's not slate bending. It's not multiple standard deviation upside. But he can give you that path. Jalen Brunson, 26% FanDuel, 20% DraftKings. Perfectly happy getting to some Jalen at 85, 84 across sites. Any given slate upside for Jalen, any given slate upside for Mikal Bridges right next to him. Had a couple good ones in a row. Hopefully rounding the corner for getting into form for the season. Came up more on DraftKings. He's 6,400, Mikal, on the FanDuel slate. That's having a bit of an impact. We just got him 1% of the time, but he's an okay mixer over there. For 5,700 shooting guard and small forward, that's a really interesting piece. 16%. Really interesting from like this mid-range as a mixer. But definite upside. I've got him at 36 minutes, which is nearly 2 minutes below his season average. They just shouldn't really have a difficult time with Charlotte today. So I didn't put everybody at like their max minutes that Tibbs usually runs them out there for. We might actually see him empty the bench at the end of this one, assuming things go well. Not really sweating blowout or anything like that, but there is a little bit of a minor impact for those. I'm not going to project Mikal Bridges for 37, 39 minutes. I'm not going to project Josh Hart for 39 minutes in this game just because of how they should just handle business. They might go out there and play because Tibbs is a lunatic, but it's less likely than normal. Trey Murphy, interesting piece on the DraftKings slate, 12%. We've been getting a lot of Trey as he's been seeing his price go up and up a little bit. 0.94 per minute so far this season. Still looking like a playable part here, but more just a playable mid-range guy. Not a priority. Especially with people coming back now for New Orleans. You could argue that maybe he takes a little bit more of a back seat with Ingram coming back. So is who he is kind of a game on DraftKings, and I feel like he's a little expensive at 68 on FanDuel. Really didn't get any of them. Donovan Mitchell, 10%, makes sense to me. Same deal on DraftKings. Actually, the exact same number of shares on both sites. 87 on FanDuel, 88 on DraftKings. Just an is who he is game for Mitchell. There's nothing special about the situation, but Donovan Mitchell can go out there and drop 55, 60 FanDuel DraftKings points on anybody. So I never mind having 10% of Mitchell, but it's not looking like a day where you absolutely need to go out there and grab more shares of Donovan Mitchell. Brendan Miller, I think we're breezing kind of past him today. 8,300, undercut to the field at 2.6%. Good player, and still a good situation for him there. No LaMelo, no Miles Bridges. It's just an ongoing good spot. But his price is kind of leveled back up. There's a lot of better options on the slate. So cue the 75-point Brandon Miller FanDuel game. On DraftKings, we got him a little bit more. 9%. He's 8,500 over there. A little bit more expensive. Same value number. Maybe a little happenstance coming through, or just maybe how guys drop into positions. We've got a lot of shooting guard, small forward guys up here grabbing some value that don't exist on DraftKings. So that's probably what the culprit is there. I don't think Miller's much better than what just kind of he looks like on this slate. Upside ceiling, yes, but not a priority. Chris Paul, just 18, well, a solid 18.6%, but significantly below the field there for 62. 8% significantly below the field on the DraftKings slate. Where am I relative to the people who created the ownership that he ran at? That's always a good question. I think Chris Paul's probably the least exciting of the Spurs today. Got him at... Yeah, I gave him a tiny... I gave him 100th of a point. It's actually taking away something that the model wanted to give him to round him down toward that. The model wanted him at 1.11, if that makes a difference to you. It would have been a 32-point projection. I took him down by 1 fantasy point. and normalize the rate, basically. It's a great spot. There's no reason to believe that Chris Paul couldn't succeed here. And again, we do have a big piece of him on FanDuel because he's a 5+ value guy at 6,200 over there. He's point guard only on both sites. Not ideal as far as flexibility and lineup building goes. I might give him a nudge. I could easily just give him a minute to take care of that. I've got him at 29. If I give him 30, he'll look a little bit better. But really, if you take more of them, it's a situation where, from where we are, you're just leveling them up to the field. So very much a spot where, as I've been talking about, I'd rather have a position, I think, on that play. No, Mike, I think Michael Knack, I think Malik Monk looks pretty good. Less so on FanDuel, where he's 75. But for 6,700 on DraftKings, he is our second most highly exposed guard in our top 150, and we're getting him ahead of the field. So that's a position that I think you want, Mike. Yeah, Power makes a good point in the chat as well about the Bulls, where we danced around a couple of those guys so far. But yeah, Buzelis looks even better if Giddey's out and Giddey's questionable. At that $3,000 price tag, that would be just kind of silly value. So that would shoot up and be almost as critical as those Spurs, I think. Yeah, we'll get to Iguodala. We'll get to Royce O'Neal. I like Iguodala. I'm assuming Iguodala is going to come up better. I think he's going to be a really interesting piece, most likely more on DraftKings. And then I expect we'll have some Royce O'Neal. I gave him plenty of upside in the minutes. Just as usual, when there's missing parts from Phoenix, especially the missing parts that they're missing right now, everybody's going to look a little bit better. It kind of floats the entire group. And then those two players specifically are exactly the right call-outs. Here's Io. Speaking of the Bulls, 8%, a little bit below the field for 57. Shooting guard, point guard, power guard. That almost came out of my mouth. 5,300 on DraftKings. Looks like the exact same play across sites. Would benefit if Josh Giddey, who's right here, doesn't play. You could argue that he would just gain basically directly those shares, but they're different prices. It's not an exactly direct comparison. What would be interesting is Io being the cheaper of those two guys would inflate for a little bit of additional value as well. So he would probably pick up bigger shares than the combination of these two guys looks like right now. So that's, I think, what makes him interesting. Jared Butler, again, 39 on FanDuel, didn't really come up at all, but another $3,000 guy on DraftKings. 17 minutes projected. You're kind of gambling with the upside there. In 16-7 the other day, he put up an 11.5 on FanDuel, but overall, in his 8 and change minutes a night over 14 games, he's been at 1.14 this year, 1.01 last year. I hesitate to call him much of a play outside of maybe if you want to swap around some of the dirt cheap $3,000, $3,100 pieces. He's not a terrible positional swap from a similarly projected 16 minutes THT. So you can do that. But with several big $3,000 pieces on the slate with just more reliable minutes upside, I kind of like steering around these plays. I think that makes sense. We're getting it less than the field. A little bit of it is fine. Too much of it probably starts to drag you down. Marcus Smart, no love on FanDuel, 4% on DraftKings, mix and match piece at best, and honestly, that price is just getting buried by shares of those other guys. Kyrie, definite upside. Both guard positions on both sites, 86 DraftKings, 84 on FanDuel, 7% over on FanDuel, a little bit below the field, 3% on the DraftKings slate, again, a little bit below the field. For 113 per minute, this is probably about right / high. His pricing, 117 on DraftKings for 8,600. If you get him back to this guy, though, a tenth of a point better on both sites, that becomes a reasonably good price. And there's no reason in the universe to believe that Kyrie couldn't succeed at that level against Washington today. So a guy I'd at least be interested if there's a couple additional shares of Kyrie sitting there as I sort lineups and they're outside the top 150 by 3 or 4 spots. I might grab those, just replace the bottom few lineups with Kyrie shares. I think that's a reasonable move to 10, 12% on FanDuel 12% maybe on DraftKings. And yeah, you're leveling back to the field, but it's not from like far away. It's not from a big undercut to just kind of bring it back to the field. You're basically taking it from, I got a couple less shares too. If I reran it, I might have gotten those shares that the field got. So either way, slightly above, slightly below, or with the field on Kyrie, perfectly fine. Same thing for Des Bane. He's not exactly highly owned on either site. 2% by us, 3% on DraftKings, probably 5%-ish by the field. So a few additional shares of him is fine. 1.06 per minute on FanDuel, 1.09 per minute so far this year on DraftKings. One of the few guys from Memphis that you could reasonably roster. KJ Simpson, a mix and match piece, 37. Yet another, is like I was saying before, Isaiah Joe, 36 minutes. Shooting guard and small forward eligible, just not relevant to this slate. KJ Simpson, 3,700, point guard only, 21 minutes projected. Just not relevant to this slate. The way that other guys are coming up is extremely high values. Could either one of those guys go out there and succeed a little bit? Absolutely. Is it more likely to be KJ Simpson with a little bit better of a rate if he manages to play those 21 minutes? Probably. But Isaiah Joe put up similar numbers in fewer minutes just last game. So Isaiah Joe every now and again can get there, but these are not the guys that we want to be considering. They didn't come up at all on FanDuel. They are mix and match pieces at the absolute best. So if you're building out lineups one by one, you do not get to players like this until the back end of those lineups because there's so many values. And if you leave them entirely on the board, that's also perfectly fine. Solid players with mix and match exposures across DeJounte Murray, Jordan Poole, Darius Garland, CJ McCollum, even Christian Brown kind of goes into that, not that group, but a group of the next, tier down of like price-wise. Christian Brown, Bilal Coulibaly, Tyus Jones, Miles McBride are kind of in that group. McBride really doesn't have the rate or get the upside of minutes unless something goes completely haywire. Tyus Jones could provide a little bit of value. Another guy playing decent upside for reliable minutes for Phoenix. Could play more than his usual run, which is 32.5. I've got him just at 32, but he played 33.5 the other day. And again, missing pieces for Phoenix. So different configuration of that team. We could see an uptick of opportunity. Could see an uptick for at least 2 to 3 additional minutes. Levine really not coming up. I wouldn't mind some additional shares of Levine. We got him 4%, hard undercut to the field on FanDuel, 0.1 share of them, and a pretty hard undercut to the field on DraftKings as well. Especially if there's no Giddey, just another piece out of the way. I wouldn't mind a couple additional shares, but I'm also happy being below the field, so it would be conservative in like how many shares I'm grabbing. Technically, we're dealing with just a 4.47 FanDuel value score, a 4.59 value score on DraftKings. That does not make him appealing. It's more just, player upside game situation that maybe could be better than the math might be able to see. But that's a faith-based play more than anything else. Mix and match shares at best of anybody on DraftKings. The one major outlier across sites, Grayson Allen, yet another guy from Phoenix that could be benefiting. 28 minutes projected. He's playing 23-1 per night this season, but definitely a path to him playing at least 28 minutes, and honestly, upside beyond that. 0.76 per minute this year, 0.78 per minute last year. We did not get him on DraftKings where he's 54. He's only 46. He's basically the opposite of some of those plays we saw with those price differences up there. So that's the only thing really giving him value is minutes over price. A little bit from position, solid 5.10, and going to have him. If you lower that, get him around the field 20-25%, that's also fine. There are plenty of reasonable pivots from a 0.76, 0.78 guy. So you don't have to go over the moon for Grayson Allen shares, but he's going to present some value on FanDuel. Really nobody else. Josh Green, a couple onesie-twosie shares. It's very cheap at 45, but just getting gobbled up by guys like Grayson Allen and many better opportunities. Joker came over during that to warn us not to play Grayson Allen. He doesn't like Grayson Allen, right? I think Grayson Allen was a dirty player in college, right? Yeah. All right, top of the board here. Again, major outliers on the FanDuel side. We talked about Amen Thompson already, but to reiterate, he's a critical piece on FanDuel at 53% exposure with shooting guard eligibility. Guys we haven't talked about yet from that late game, though, Andrew Wiggins, No Steph, no Draymond. Kind of a clear path to Andrew Wiggins shares. 28% on the FanDuel slate. He's a 1.04 per minute guy, but goes up in this situation. So should have the opportunity to be the primary scorer for this team today. He's a decent enough facilitator. Kuminga's right there, 51% of Jonathan Kuminga because he only costs 5,800 power forward and small forward. Again, no Draymond, just clears the road for success for Kuminga. 26.4% usage rate this year, 1.07 per minute on your FanDuel scale. He's already been a better player this year. 28-9 played the other day, put up 34 FanDuel points. They haven't really been pushing these guys into the 30-minute or more range, but given the configuration of the team today, I could see Kuminga getting at least to 30, and I've only got him at 28, and we're getting him 51% of the time. He only goes upward from here. Jabari Smith, 42% exposed, 5,400 power forward. This is where we're just clicking in our forwards from this game on FanDuel. And then that gives you extreme swappability between shares. If, you start to see one guy go up in projections for ownership as the night goes on or however you work, somebody else comes off the table for value. No Freddie Van Vliet. Now I've got a ton of positional options to move pieces around. I want 3 guys from this game, maybe 4, in a bunch of lineups today on FanDuel. I'll lose until I win. The Millie says Booker owns the penalties at 4%. I just love getting to Devin Booker when there's no KD there. And it's a soft matchup that he should be able to eat. So 28% FanDuel, 32% DraftKings. Head of the field on DK, a little behind the field on the FanDuel slate, which I don't love. He's actually cheaper on FanDuel. 5.21 value score versus the 5.18 on DK. I think this is probably bouncing off some of these guys going into those positions, and then maybe a little bit of popularity just in the way that the sim ran. But would not mind a little bit more Booker. If you're coming away from any of these guys in that late game, I think that's a direct pivot as a good option. He's much more expensive than any of those guys. So direct pivot is the wrong way to put that. I think that's the guy that you might want to pivot to, and then you're just figuring out ways to pay for it, and you most likely have additional value shares that you haven't used in that scenario. As far as guys on both sites, we talked at the very top of the show about Zach Collins. I've got him at 25.5 minutes. I just kind of split the baby. I wanted to go 26, 22, and then I wanted to account for Mamu there and give him, I only threw him a minute, but I at least wanted to put him on people's radar. But Collins is the guy I expect to get the bulk of the upside. He's 35 on DraftKings. He's coming up 61% of the time. We actually got more Bassey, I believe, for 3,000. But they both look absolutely fantastic. You can play them together. There's no downside to doing that. So it's just kicking down that value door as far as price goes, and you're going to open the door, and there's going to be all the superstars sitting there to go into your lineup. So just play it. It just makes sense. If we get something weird like Mamu starting or something like that, you'll see it immediately in the projections. Just follow the projections on those San Antonio bigs, but they're all going to look good. Or excuse me, Collins and Bassey are going to look good. Unless something weird happens, Mamu's not playable. Buzelis, again, 3,000 on DraftKings. Small forward, power forward eligible. I've got him just at 21 minutes right now, but could definitely gain ground. And he's already coming up at 41% and ahead of the field on the DraftKings slate. He is not a piece right now on FanDuel. He's 41. That's not a terrible price. He's been a 0.91 minute per minute player in his limited 11.6 minutes per game, but he jumped up in minutes recently. He played 21-8 the other day. That's around where we've got him. But if we're looking, come on. 25, 3 games back, 29 minutes, which is what I'm most interested in, going back 5 games. That was with Julian Phillips out. So, reasonable upside for Buzelis to play, just a couple additional minutes. And then if Giddey comes off the board, there's more. So really like at least keeping that one in your right at the front of your radar as we go toward lock. And watch how things change with that Bulls team. But that is an intriguing one right now. You could cut the number that I've got him at I'm basically giving him credit for what he's done this season. 0.91 per minute on the season. Got him at 0.90. And that was just happenstance because I hit it and it was close enough to 0.91. He's going to be owned. He's popular, but we are 2.5 times more exposed to him. If you see him come down, if he drops to 15.5 as a DraftKings projection, just leave him on the table. He looks more like these guys. He looks like his teammate Julian Phillips, who's also, by the way, 3,000. Who was drinking at DraftKings when they put this slate together? Let's just price everybody at 3,000. What the hell? Wild one. That's also a reasonable pivot that would swing on a couple additional minutes going one way or the other. I've got Julian Phillips at 26 minutes. He came up less than Buzelis did already. He's the lower end per minute performer. 0.70 this year, 0.68 on DraftKings, 0.57 last year on FanDuel. Super low usage guy. Buzelis more around league average usage so far. Neither guy really much of a stat stuffer. So, just price-based and opportunity-based there. Buzelis, I think, is the guy that you're interested in between those two, though. Mobley is who he is spot. 27% on FanDuel. Perfectly happy with that. Power forward and center eligible for just 8,000. Honestly, that's getting to be pretty cheap for a guy who's putting up 1.24 per minute this season. You could definitely price him a little bit higher for that kind of output. 121 per minute on DraftKings. He's only 78 over there. 23% of the time. If you have him 25, even 30%, you're not necessarily hurting yourself. That's a decent upside piece. There's Royce O'Neal, who somebody asked about earlier. 19% exposed, a little bit under the field. 4,900 small forward, power forward on DraftKings. 14% exposed, same positioning for 54 on the FanDuel slate. Royce, when he steps into a role, definitely can provide upside. He can also very quickly provide a clunker of a game. Last year, he was a 0.83 per minute player. This year, that's 0.94 in his 25 minutes a night over 20 games. An effective enough option, but he's, even when he steps into more time and bigger role, not necessarily going to take more shots. Not necessarily going to spike huge usage. He does stuff categories a little bit. Not a bad assist rate, double-digit rebounding rate, double-digit assist rate. So you get a little bit of across-the-board production out of him. He's a upside piece for sure today, but he's not the safest among upside pieces. And again, we don't care about safety. In fact, we can throw safety to the side of the road because if that's all you're worried about, you're pretty much never going to be on the correct upside plays. But I also don't know that he's explosive upside. I think he's just a good is who he is upside guy, if that makes sense. DeRozan, hard undercut to the field at 2%, but that probably puts the field in the 5 to 8 range on FanDuel. Much more appealing on DraftKings. 16% exposed over there. That is below the field. 7,500 versus 7,800. That's a nice little price difference. So you get more of them, but still below the field on DK. I'm fine being there on DeRozan, honestly. As much as I like that Sacramento group of starters, he's probably my least favorite. I'd rather have Sabonis, which we do on FanDuel. 16% exposed to Sabonis. We have that nice big chunk of De'Aaron Fox. We've got a lot of Monk. So I'm kind of happy to not have DeRozan. He's a guy that maybe it's biased. Maybe he's just burnt me so many times over the years of just being who he is. 1.07 on the nose this year. 1.07 on the nose last year. 105 the year before. He's a shot taker. 25.2% usage. Nearly 25 this year. Has a decent assist rate. Just, I don't know, finds ways to hit mediocrity more often than not. So again, just give me more Sabonis if I'm going to the Kings, and I like that opportunity. 9,300 center power forward. We did get him a lot on FanDuel, level with the field at 16. Below the field on DraftKings, a little harder to reach over there for the 93. That is still, I'll point out, a 5.3 value score on one of the more reliable high-end per minute performers on the slate. So grabbing a few additional shares of Sabonis, taking him up about the field since we're not at a hard undercut to the field, I think that's fine on DraftKings. Again, with a somewhat desirable player. Alex Sarr, nothing really on FanDuel. Did come up, though, on DK. 5,200 for Sarr. 0.99 per minute on the DraftKings scale. Just over that on FanDuel. Got him in 28 minutes with some appreciable upside. Put up right about a point per minute in his 27.2 minutes the other day. Needs to start making a few more buckets. 45.8% true shooting is not going to do anything special for you, but double-digit assist, double-digit rebounding rate. Making just 24% of the 4.5 threes he's taken. He makes 2 of those today, and you're off and running for a few additional points. Come on. Again, we're missing pieces from Washington. You could give him... Nah, I've got him like right on the nose for the current year production. There's a little bit of a... If you wanted to nudge him slightly, he's an okay mixer. Because he's really not expensive. $5,200 is not a bad price there. So if you wanted to kick him up to 20, like that's a reasonable guy who, as a pivot, what I was talking about earlier, instead of just saying like, well, give me low own 5,500, 1.3% exposed Christian Brown. No, the guy that you want as that pivot is probably a guy like Sarr, who just mass out better for you at the same price or cheaper price. So go to this, take a little bit of additional shares of that. You kick it up by a couple of points. You're dealing with a very strong value score that outpaces most of the other values down here, even among some of the similarly priced options. You do have the weird mixers like Julian Phillips if you're just looking at the value score, and we did get 10% of him again. But that's not a bad pivot. That's the kind of guy I'm talking about when it's like, yeah, he's getting some ownership. But if you drop him into a combination, odds are nobody else is going to have it. It's just how the math comes together. There are so many. There's a massive, absurd number of combinations on any given slate that if you make 1-2 minor changes from even the optimal lineup on anybody's projection set, you're probably building a unique lineup. Just how basketball works. Triple J, mix and match kind of a guy on DraftKings. Really didn't get him on FanDuel. Harrison Barnes, ugh. I would trade all of these Harrison Barnes shares for more Chris Paul, who we didn't really get. Not a big fan of Harrison Barnes. Super low per minute guy, 0.67 per minute, 0.68 on DraftKings. I get it because he's cheap, 4,400 both forward spots on FanDuel, 42 both forward spots on DraftKings. That is a guy I wouldn't mind reducing my position relative to the field, still having some, but maybe having this, having that, and spreading those shares across some of these other guys. Plenty of opportunity for Harrison Barnes to go out there and do Harrison Barnes things today, but what does that really amount to? I'm not even talking about the massive basement that he comes with, 4.9 FanDuel points in 24.5 minutes the other day, for example. But what does the ceiling even look like? I really don't think there's much to work with there. I think there are better ceiling options from that price range today. He's fine to have in a few. I don't know that I would want him that much, 22%. Miller we touched on already. Didn't really get him on either site, but perfectly fine. He's just priced up a little bit for the missing pieces there. RJ, not really a piece. Better on DraftKings. 8,200 on both sites. Both forward spots on both. 8.6% exposed, a little below the field on DK. Just 4% on FanDuel. But again, another guy you can take more RJ. He's playing very well in a per minute sense. 117 on FanDuel. 123 on DraftKings this season. Nice uptick for RJ. Maybe finally click for him. Or he was just benefiting from having Scotty out. 42.3 and 36.9 the other day. Kind of a more pedestrian performance. I expect that's more of what we're going to see going forward as long as more and more pieces are healthy for this team. But RJ on any given night for a fair mid-range price is a fair mid-range mixer. Keldon Johnson, another mediocre piece from San Antonio. 9%. This is right around where I'm happy being on Keldon. 6% on DraftKings. He's been a 0.90 per minute player on DraftKings this year, 0.95 last year on the FanDuel scale. That was 0.89 this year. So it's a little downturn. Got him at 23, but he could easily go out and play 28. So that would make him significantly more appealing. I do think you want some Keldon just to cover that possibility for one. but nobody's idea of a great player. Champagne, kind of similar, 5,400 versus 46 there, 5,000 versus 46 there. Mix and match player, we did get more of Champagne on DraftKings. We got more of Keldon between the two on FanDuel. But the obvious guys are the guys you really want from San Antonio. These guys are mixers that you should include in a large portfolio of lineups. If you build one lineup today, you need neither Keldon Johnson nor Julian Champagne in it. Aaron Gordon, basically only on DK, 5%, 5,900 over there. Is who he is, kind of a spot, but a good player. I just always like having some Aaron Gordon in my lineups because he is a stat stuffer. He is a guy who fills multiple categories. 15.4% assist rate, 10.5% rebounding rate. I talk about these guys a lot. You know, guys like him, guys like Julius Randle, to throw a player that nobody likes into the mix. Just these bigs who have good rebounding skills, are decent scorers. In Gordon's case, can be kind of a high-flying dude. And also put up decent assist numbers, are good facilitators, have good potential assist numbers. And Aaron Gordon is one of those guys. So anybody who's filling all three categories at least a little bit in the double digits in those two is going to give me a little bit of upside that typically the public's not chasing. So I don't mind a few additional shares of Gordon here, but the field is there a little bit. Call it like 8%. He's just fine today. He's not exceptional in any way today. There's Iguodaro. Somebody asked about him before. I am very surprised that he's only 4% exposed in this sim on DraftKings. We had a major piece of him on FanDuel. Power forward and center eligible on both sites. 4,400 on both sites. That puts him in a 5.14 value score on FanDuel where we're looking for 5. He's just a 5.02 on the DraftKings scale where we're looking for 5.5. Slightly better per minute rate on FanDuel versus DraftKings, but that's not probably what's making the difference. I think on DK, he's probably just losing shares to the absurd value and the massive shares of Zach Collins and Charles Bassey that we're getting. He's not as good a price fit as those guys. He's got basically the same opportunity as those guys. Let's do this.
So on DraftKings, that is just directly where those shares are going. We have 137% going to Charles Bassey and Zach Collins. He's just getting chewed up by that. And the reason I wanted to put it side by side is so that you could see the impact of the value number. Look where these guys are. These are two of the season's highest value numbers, not just this slate. Iguodaro technically doesn't reach our DraftKings value threshold at 5.5. He looks good. The opportunity is there. The team likes him. The team seems to like how they flow when he's in there. I expect him to get more minutes between him and Plumlee and him to be the value, but he really didn't land here. On FanDuel, where these guys don't exist as values basically at all at 55 and 58, despite being in the exact same opportunity, he came up a lot more. He's a lot more of a piece on FanDuel. I'm surprised by it. Now that I see it and think it through, I'm not surprised by it, but I'm surprised based on where I started the show, thinking that we would have a bunch of Iguodaro. I do think that he can fit in with these guys, right? So if you have some lineups on DraftKings that use all three of those guys, or if you use him as a mixer for one of these guys, not in a big way, but in some spots, that's okay. You're sacrificing a tremendous amount of math-based value, but not necessarily NBA opportunity value, if you get me. So it's an okay mixer, but by the numbers, we are way lighter on Iguodaro than Collins and Bassey on DraftKings. Total opposite situation on FanDuel. This is one of the more interesting slates, site to site, just with that crazy game on FanDuel. That's, again, getting what was it? 362% ownership on FanDuel for that, just from that Houston Golden State game at the end of the night. That is a late night sledgehammer today. Let's clean up the end of forwards. Make sure we didn't miss anybody important. And then we'll jump to centers. Michael Knack likes Monk and DeRozan with SGA. I like Monk with SGA. I don't love DeRozan, but he's not terrible. You could absolutely succeed with that lineup. Just out of those Sacramento guys, DeRozan is my least favorite out of those guys, and he came up a little bit light. Brian says that value is so absurd it reminds me of Yahoo value rates. It really does. Yeah, broken DraftKings pricing today. They just did not get to the correctly anticipated version of the slate, and then they sprinkled a bunch of guys in at 3,000 who just are unjustifiable to have at that price. Weird DK slate. Let's see. We talked about Royce. We talked about Mobley. We've gone through most of these guys. Lot of mixing and matching going on through all these guys, though, on DraftKings. I think we were in this territory. All right, so we talked about SAR. We talked about having this range of guys that are swappable as just very, very solid hot swaps that you can go to in the 10, 11, 12% range, be level with the field or take additional shares. And those are the guys you want to be going to, not the just I'm 0.5% owned by the public because I'm not a good option today types. Stay away from those guys. These are the guys you want to live with. So decent range of those options here at a variety of prices across Mikal Bridges, OG, Jalen Williams, Josh Hart, Trey Murphy, Scotty Barnes, Jaren Jackson, Harrison Barnes, Julian Phillips, whatever. But those guys, again, at the value range are in that mix and are not getting crazy ownership on DK. The real outlier there is on FanDuel, Harrison Barnes at 22%. Every single one of those good players that I just mentioned in that list is just getting consumed by all the weight going to these players. Those are the same positions that these guys play, and they're taking all the shares. So if you're looking to get away from that late game, that's your range of guys. But they really didn't come up all that solid. You would definitely throw any of these other values into the mix, like the 5.08 from Keegan Murray, another piece from Sacramento that's okay. I should correct, actually. Keegan Murray, 5. DeMar DeRozan, 4, if I'm ranking the top 5 for Sacto. Low-end per minute guy, low usage rate guy, 0.74 per minute FanDuel, 0.75 per minute DraftKings, 15.1% usage. So Keegan Murray actually takes the crown of my least favorite guy from the Kings. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Take the crown from the Kings. Should just end the show. Sorry, everybody. I blew it. See you tomorrow. Grayson Allen, we talked about already. Keegan Murray, we just talked about. Mix and match shares of the rest of these guys. Nobody all that interesting. Onesie twosies on the DraftKings slate. That includes MPJ, Brandon Clark, Brandon Ingram. No real love for any of those guys. Nobody stands out from, at best, and is who he is spot. Let me pull that board back up. DK, right, Mike? I've got Hart right there, and we got DeRozan right there. They are coming up pretty damn similar. We're technically below the field on both, it looks like. We did get 2 more of DeRozan for 75, both forward spots. You're paying a $800 tax to get to DeMar DeRozan over a guy who's going to play similar or more minutes. Hart's been playing at 0.97 this year, but he was a 0.83 per minute player last year. There will be downside games for Josh Hart. He was one of the ultimate collectors of fantasy points most nights, but he's very, very good at it. In my mind, that's essentially a tie given the price difference, but I will give it to DeRozan just given that the sim came up with a little bit more of DeRozan. But you can see the price difference illustrated by that value score, right? 511 value score for Hart, 477 for DeRozan. So in a direct head-to-head, I will slightly favor DeRozan, given how he mathed out, given the slightly higher overall projection. But I would say it's not just a 1-to-1 comparison because there's enough value in that 800 that it probably buys you a nice upgrade at a different position. So to answer that question correctly, to answer that question in full, it should probably be at least a 2 for 2, if not a 3 for 3. So just consider the full spectrum of what that change from DeRozan to Hart could buy you. And that's the correct way to look at it. If it's on FanDuel, it's a $400 price difference. It's a little bit less important. But we really didn't get very much of either guy, so there's probably a better option than both of those guys. Mamba says, can you start tomorrow's show with why Mamba is definitely the GOAT? I tried to tell you all, but next time maybe you'll listen. I know Cujo did. For what? What'd you hit? Mamba, I said that McCain was a great play on FanDuel. The discussion we had was about past results, whether or not he had put up a couple of bad games in his last few, and he had. He indisputably did. He put up a single-digit FanDuel score in one of his last 5 games. We talked about it yesterday at great length. McCain was an excellent play on FanDuel yesterday. I had a ton of them. The one statement we were disputing was whether or not he had bad games, not whether he looked good yesterday. He did look good yesterday. For a while, he looked like he was going to completely fail. I don't think he smashed yesterday. He put up, 30-some-odd FanDuel points? He was okay. Let's see. I mean, remember toward the end of that, I stopped and I was trying to say, I'm half defending this and half saying it's not good because I don't think he's great. I think rookie guards are unreliable at best. And then I went into the whole spiel about reliability and upside and everything. What did he actually score? Why am I getting... There we go. He hit 5.5 times value on the nose. 32.9 FanDuel points for 6,000. That's a serviceable game. That's not a slate winning game. You can win a slate with that in your lineup, but that did not win you that slate. It wasn't a bad game. It wasn't a bad game if you didn't get the minutes, and the only thing I was debating was no, Mamba. Again, dude. I had his minutes almost exactly yesterday. I had him at, I think, 32 minutes yesterday on that show. What did he play? The debate that we were having was whether he had in the past couple of games put up a bad score. And he indisputably had. I'll read it to you again. McCain was in my lineup that came in 36. Let's put it that way. Oh, you know what? I'm not going to be able to access the game log again. I read it on yesterday's show. Not yesterday for the previous slates. Right. You are not correct about the minutes that he played in those games. He played 40-plus minutes in one of those games and put up, I forget what that FanDuel score was, but it was pathetic. He played 30-plus minutes in another one, put up a single-digit FanDuel score. Remember the 40-plus minute performance was a half a point per minute? We were talking about it yesterday. And then the other one was a 30-plus minute night where he put up a single-digit FanDuel performance just like 3 games ago. That's what we were talking about. But to your ultimate point, nothing about one performance makes anybody right or wrong about any of this. There are right and wrong answers on this side of lock, and then that's why they play the games. But the results of any given game do not make anybody correct. Me, you, Brian Kazorian, Power, Javier Hernandez. Doesn't make anybody right or wrong based on one day, one given result. But yeah, I was on that play yesterday. I had a ton of McCain. Anywho. So Bagley minute projection. He's in here somewhere. Actually, I got him on the other screen. I think I have him at 8 minutes. I didn't give him very much. Is he starting? Was there news that I missed? Ty Jerome's available. Trae Young Pro, that's Friday. Luke Kennard now questionable for day. Who cares? What brings Bagley to mind? In his last 4 appearances, he's played 2, 4, 8, and 3 minutes. I don't think Marvin Bagley is going to be at all relevant unless he ends up landing in a starting lineup. That's the kind of guy that I'm talking about, that you don't want to just be like, Marvin Bagley's not owned by anybody, because he isn't going to play, or not going to play very much. Not nearly enough to put him in relevant run. Javier says, I'm always wrong. My wife said so. A site had him at 15. Even if you give him 15 minutes, I really don't think he's going to be relevant. Again, I've got him, I think it's 9 that I had him at. I forget whether I changed it in the... Yeah, he's right here. 9 minutes. He's another $3,000 guy. You just don't need him. Right? You've got much, much better $3,000 options on DraftKings today. $3,800 on FanDuel, center, the one center site. You're just not going to need him. If I give him those additional 6-7 minutes, it's not going to make a difference. 118 per minute on DraftKings, 114 per minute. He is a good performer in a per minute sense, but I don't really see that coming to fruition. Yeah, I'd much rather have Alex Sarr. He's very strong looking play up toward the top. But yeah, I don't really see it for Bagley. If it swings, you'll see it in the projection. Let's put it that way, right? If I look at it later and I'm like, oh, duh, that's why that question came up. He should have 6-7 more minutes. You'll see this jump to essentially like whatever you see him plus is about what I gave him minutes wise, because he's going to be about a 1 per minute projection. So if you see him go up to 16, it means I gave him 6 additional minutes and now have him projected at 15. But again, with your Bassey on the board, with your Zach Collins on the board, with a number of other $3,000, $3,100 mixers, I just don't think you're getting there. Let's get those centers taken care of here. So outlier centers. TJD, center and power forward eligible on FanDuel. We probably hit him already before when we were doing the power forwards, but I don't remember saying his name. So 37% level with the field on Trace Jackson Davis. Yet another piece from the Golden State Houston game. And then Şengün, 8,800, 32.6% exposed. It's been a per minute monster this season at 1.45. The minutes have trended up a little bit, just a couple of minutes per game. So love the Şengün option. And honestly, that's still a very strong price for a guy who's playing at 1.45. Should be able to not necessarily push around the guys from Golden State, but should definitely benefit from Golden State being a little bit undermanned. No love for Steven Adams, just mix and match shares of... now we're down into the full slate. So one more time to reiterate. Bassey and Collins. Mix and match playability on FanDuel, but not anywhere remotely close to the values they are on DraftKings. 3,000, 3,500 apiece on DraftKings, 55 and 58 on FanDuel. Those are just radically different prices. 76% of Bassey on DraftKings, you just plug them in and let them open that value door. Same deal with Collins, 61%, well above the field on both players. They look absolutely tremendous. Don't care that it's a minute split at the position. You just can plug them in for upside based on price. Nikola Jokic, 15% on FanDuel, 26% exposed on DraftKings. These guys buy you Nikola Jokic. That's just how it works. Same deal with the other $3,000 options. So you're just taking that so that you can get Jokic and SGA in the same lineup. So that you can get Jokic and some of the other top-end pieces. So you can get not Jokic, but say a pivot to Karl Anthony Towns, who came up for 9,000, 22% of the time, a little bit below the field. That's a very reasonable pivot from one high-scoring player to another. Not that Cat is Jokic, but there's at least, kind of somewhat similar trajectory for 3,000 less. Now I got money to spend at other positions. So I'm getting my SGA share with my value guys, with Cat, and then plugging in $3,000 upgrade at a different spot. There's so much to work with based on these two guys specifically, and then some of the other ones we've talked about. Mobley, FanDuel, perfectly fine, 27%. We did hit him when we went down the forwards, but one more time, it just looks very, very good. It's an is who he is kind of a spot, but he is a good per minute performer, and he's not really priced up appropriately on either site. So happy to have these 1 in 4-ish shares or slightly more. I don't think I would undercut. I think if I'm doing anything to take a position on Mobley, it's taking more. Sabonis, again, definitely happy to have more on FanDuel where he's looking a little stronger. DraftKings, 5%. If you get 10, there's nothing wrong with that. It's probably about level with the field. Good per minute player, 1.30 per minute on the shorter DraftKings slate. I can see the appeal. Again, this one I am surprised by in where I stood on the slate coming into the show. But as we talked it through, it does make sense because all those shares are just going right there. And then anytime you're not using one of these guys in one of those spots, it's probably just going to one of these guys. But Iguodala does represent the same NBA scenario that these guys are stepping into, but essentially today, and is a decent enough performer for the price that you can see the path to success. Should play plenty of minutes today. Vooch looking a little bit better on the FanDuel slate, 7,900, going up against a Wemby-less San Antonio team. Just 1% on DraftKings. It's a mix and match player for the 85 on DK. The price on FanDuel is not bad, though. 7,900 again. To get a 1.28 per minute performer for that low a price at any position is just valuable. That's going to help get to, in combination with some of your key FanDuel value plays, it's going to help you get to your, well, not Jokic shares because they play the same position, but it's going to help you get to shares of higher end players. Joe Val didn't really come up after popping his head above water the other day. Pirtle, mix and match at best, but a good player to do that with. 77 on FanDuel, 3%. 74 on DraftKings, just one share and a hard undercut to the field. But definitely, based on just his per-minute ability, his any given slate upside, you can take additional shares of Jakob Pirtle. I just don't like really much of anything from Toronto going up against OKC. Just not a good spot for that team, really. And just so many better options at that position. Hartenstein, love the player, but not for DFS tonight. Up to 81 on FanDuel already, 76 on DraftKings. Just a tremendous, tremendous rebounder. Very, very good player. Miss him. Wish he was still a Knick. That was the unfortunate scenario they were going into last year with his, with their inability to go above that second apron to match and bring him in. What else we got? Nothing really. Empty shares of Jared Allen, no Santi Aldama on FanDuel, one share of him on DraftKings. Mix and match pieces through the $5,000 guys over here at best. Nick Richards, Derek Lively, Danny Gafford, Mason Plumlee, no exposure to any of those guys really on either site. You could see one of those guys in 28 to 30 minutes, 25 to 30 in Lively's case. You could see one of those guys stepping forward. Every one of those guys is a good per minute performer. But their shares are just getting gobbled up by so many better options or just the requirement to play different value options or whatever at those positions. But these guys do exist. These guys are at least effective mixers. I know that I specifically said, you don't need to go to the zero on guys. But in this case, where we're getting, we got no Jared Allen. He's probably 1-2% owned by the field. He's a 5+ value, 1.11 per minute guy. That doesn't necessarily apply when you're talking about 1+ per minute rates. It's more about the guys who are 0.73 that they're not owned for a reason. These guys are not owned for a reason, but it's that so many of these shares exist. So if you pivot to a couple of these guys, that's fine. You always can just tell that by what their fantasy points per minute rate looks like. I think I would, Javier. Would you play both Bassey and Collins in a single entry? I think so. I guess, yeah, to the next point, though, you are sacrificing that Jokic share. It's probably going to swing entirely on that. Right? Like, if I do that, I'm going center util, straight line through some of these top guys, right? Devin Vassell is in that lineup. Malik Monk is in that lineup. I probably, in my initial build, skipped the Buzelis share. It's there, though, if you wanted to take that and book two of these guys from this next tier. But we're dealing with, what's that? 18.2 spend there. And then as long as you're getting like Booker and SGA into that lineup with, can we get like with Fox? No, that's too much. right? That's 7 guys. Yeah, that's too much. I think I would. Just because you've got 2 pretty high-scoring options there from the top shelf if you're sacrificing that Jokic share at center. And then you've got a number of upper mid-range and high-value guys there. And you do have the option to build Buzelis into that top-end package. And now you're taking a 21-2 spend across 5 positions. That probably does leave you room to put 3 of those top-end guys in there. I think it's viable. I would probably, if you have access to Sims or to some optimizers, I would run it through with that construction. Try and run, build out a bunch of lineups with that specific construction. See how they perform against a field that is just public builds. And then do it the opposite. Put 1 in with Jokic and see how those run. And just get a feel for like which overall construction is the better performer. And then you could be able to fill in around the edges of either of those builds. Because quite honestly, getting Jokic alongside in that configuration, it'd probably be better to take the $3,000 Bassey. I do have more faith in Collins for the bigger score, but I think that 500 is going to make a difference if you're going all the way up the ladder to the 12,000 for Jokic in the other center, or in the util spot. So that's probably the combo I'd go with if I was doing that. But I think there is enough on the board with upside, with very quality star players to build in alongside both those guys, that's probably the approach that would come up more, especially just eyeballing those exposures, right? That is the most common build. And I tell you what, the slate's already different with some values that are getting shouted out in the chat there. You know what? I don't remember really saying Luka's name at all. $3% on FanDuel, 6% on DraftKings. Not looking like a critical piece. There is, any given slate, massive upside for Luka. If you want him to be your star in one of those lineups instead of a 10-1 SGA, instead of a $12,000 Jokic, it's a reasonable pivot. But he's mathing out at a lower-end value score. He's been a lower-end per-minute performer than both of those guys on the average this season, but obviously was right there last year and has that level of ability. So he's a not awful idea as a pivot, but he's more of a pivot today from some of those other guys than he is a direct play. If you want to go just by what I was just saying and look at our top lineup there, it went with Bassey and Jokic. It did include the Buzelis value share to get back to that additional value, and that's actually a good approach. If you think it through, if you are taking the Collins play off the board, just put the other $3,000 guy and you claw back that Collins value by doing that. So this lineup's still getting you Booker, Vassell, Josh Hart, Io, Alexander Sarr, and there's a lot of mix and match ability between all of those guys. So that's the direct path to success that I didn't land on as I was talking it through. If you go away from combining Collins and Bassey like this second lineup does, and that's a straight line to a lot of the guys we were talking about, include the Buzelis $3,000 share. It's almost as simple as that, and that's borne out by all of these lineups that we're looking at here. Good mix, though. I mean, you can see the ability to roster stars and then just roster a solid mix of upper mid-range upper mid-range players. The Jalen Brunsons of the world. Even Malik Monk can qualify for that on the right day. Booker obviously is in that group. You got a lot of Mobley coming through here. You got some Cat shares. A ton of De'Aaron Fox. But again, the Collins, Bassey, and Buzelis kind of keys to unlocking the values and getting to these combinations. So 2 of those guys, that's the best way to answer that. 2 of those guys belong in the lineups, at least in this configuration of the slate. If things change, things will change around it, and you won't get there via the projections anyway. But right now, definitely looking like 2 of Collins, Bassey, Buzelis belong in a DraftKings lineup to unlock all this. Mama, that's not really a thing I calculate. That's, a couple years ago I would have had that question at my fingertips. But just don't really sweat that anymore. Let me see if I can give you do I even have it? No, that's in the old sheet. I don't even have it in this spreadsheet anymore. For 12,000, 75, somewhere in that territory. No, more, 82. And that's just because it'll top out the slate. The real answer is probably more than that. But you're talking about a dude who's averaging 69 DraftKings points on the season, 65.2 FanDuel points. So it's not like he can't get there. But it's, if the answer to that question essentially for anybody is he capable of giving me a three standard deviation game? And the answer to that is absolutely, of course. A 3 standard deviation game for Nikola Jokic would be 24, 25 points on top of what's projected. So 85, 90 is a 3 standard deviation game. But if you get 2 and change out of them, it's probably slate breaking. Yeah, Michael, I like Jabari Smith. I don't know why. I forget. I think we talked about him. Yeah, there he is. 42%. Again, that Houston Golden State game is just an absolute late night sledgehammer. You're taking a boulder up to the top of the Empire State Building and dropping it on the slate in the late night game on FanDuel. Just a single game slate for that one on DraftKings, unfortunately. Yeah, that's what I used in the old days with you to help me get to this point. Yeah, look, Mamba, I mean, it's not a bad question to ask because that does ultimately inform value. But we just go about it different ways kind of now, rather than like calculating that out using the 5.8x plus 12 kind of formulas and everything. Just don't really need it anymore, given the way that the industry's kind of shaped now and with all these tools and everything at our disposal. Yeah, again, Butler was coming up a little bit. To answer Javier, he's another guy that is just at 3,000, and this is 3,000 at point guard, and against just 17 minutes. If you see him climb from 18 to he's essentially going to be at about a point per minute as well. So if you see him climb for every point I've given him an additional minute. Is essentially how you can figure that, and same in reverse. So right now, he's not that relevant. He's a perfectly functional value piece for the dead min. So he does click into all those spots as an alternative, most specifically probably to the Buzelis play. But we're just getting so much more value out of that spot. 6.3 value score versus 6.04. Those are both incredibly good value scores. They pale in comparison to these. But Buzelis is coming up a little bit more, probably via positioning, because you don't necessarily want all those weak Butler point guard shares boxing out all these SGA shares that we're getting, and so on. That's it's just about how the positions are clicking together. So probably just a little bit more value, small forward, power forward there. And that's the opposite scenario on FanDuel, where again you have all these forward eligible players that are dropping into so many shares. So we're not getting as much of some of those guys. Yeah, I see more downside in Butler than I see upside, but he does fit in at that price. But that's why I wanted to try and at least call out the 17 minutes there. That's always a concern. So you can, even if they look good, even if they math out a little bit, minutes do become the ultimate cutter of heads, the ultimate guillotine for upside. There's not going to be a path to success if you're limited to 17, 16 minutes. Even if he goes out and puts up if he puts up 2 over 16 minutes, then yeah, he's getting there. But that's very few and far between. Toronto start Mogbo tonight would not surprise me at all. Power. Just screw the whole slate. Yeah. Weird little things like that. Jakob Pertl's out. Grady Dick is in. It's going to be some scenario changes already. 6 o'clock, just after. Let me punch out of here. Some DraftKings lineups on the screen there. I'll just real quick for the FanDuel people. My people. There's your FanDuel versions. All right. Those are the ones we were talking about, just so you're not crying unfair. Not that you would. So that's what your FanDuel lineups look like. But this is going to change completely because we've already got some changes. I've got some changes, I think, to make in some of the projections as they're sitting there. So let me punch out of here, guys. Get all that stuff updated. It's at rotoscouts.com for anybody new. Under $1 a day access for all 3 major sports right now: football, basketball, and hockey. All in access, all 3 sports, no per sport fees, no hidden nonsense, no sudden upticks in your per week, per month, or per quarter fees. What you buy in at is where you stay. I just noticed that I had that Prize Picks helmet over there. We're not officially sponsored by Prize Picks. That way. Stupid mirroring. But since they're on the screen, go to Prize Picks. Why not? Check those guys out. Are they still in business? I have no idea. I think they are. Anyway, you guys absolutely rock. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. Share it with us when you do. And we'll be back tomorrow for more. And stay tuned to football content going up tonight, tomorrow morning, and through the weekend for the main slate. Good luck out there across the board tonight, though. A lot going on. Should be a fun night. See you.